If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. Last week I put boot to lard bottom on that clown Jason Whitlock, but when it comes to these bootlicks and scumbags, they tend to run in packs, like cockroaches. So what I'm going to do is to address not so much a person as to use this as an object lesson to illustrate a mentality that runs through these chumps and how they try to simultaneously exploit our community and yet fool the gullible into thinking they're in favor of our community. I don't like giving these fools any oxygen in this case. I actually resent it when people mention certain names in my comment section, so what I'll do is what I did with Ben Shapiro, who I refer to as BS. For the sake of this discussion, let's call our example a dummy. This fool got cooked long ago, and he pathetically tried to make a career out of attacking reparations, but apparently that wasn't as lucrative as he hoped it would be. Now, I don't pay any attention to people who are not productive and who are clout chasing. These people are the epitome of faking it till you make it. And even without knowing anything about this particular person, just looking at him and the way he tries to present himself, I immediately said, I'll bet he's some kind of wannabe financial guru who's got some course he's trying to peddle, right? That train's never late. I guess people haven't learned from the whole Tulsa real estate fiasco, but there's one born every minute, and unfortunately, in an era of low wages and high unemployment, there's always people willing to fall hook, line, and sinker for any moron who comes along claiming he's making millions, and of course the punchline is he can teach you how to do it too. Now, any Negro who talks about black generational wealth while at the same time attacking reparations and attacking black people, this is not an advocate, he's an adversary. And why would you take any financial advice from someone who has openly said he doesn't want to see black people get money that's owed to us? And when you look at these online financial gurus, they stink right off the bat. Tell me something, family. Has anyone ever seen Warren Buffett offering some "I'll teach you to be rich" course? How about Mark Cuban or Jeff Bezos? Dave Ramsey has some self-help books, and he has a so-called class that claims to teach people how to get out of debt. Admittedly, I don't care for Dave Ramsey. He strikes me as a good old boy with his head in the clouds. But I will say that he doesn't make the grandiose promises that some of these professional BS artists we see online keep making. If someone's offering you a "I'll make you rich" course or some book that's supposed to do the same, that's how these people make their money, family. Off their courses and their books. And that particular hustle is as old as publishing itself. Now, the clown I'm talking about is basically a Temu version of John Hope Bryant. There's another piece of work who does the same thing. You can't say a word about black people if you pretend that black people are in the same boat as everyone else. You can't truly pretend that you're addressing our concerns from that standpoint. It's intellectually dishonest and morally cowardly to try the all things being equal talk when we're discussing black people's position relative to everyone else. Our position is not the result of what we did, it's what was done to us. Slavery was not something that we did to ourselves, that was something that was done to us. And the brief period of Reconstruction, which is the closest this country came to actually pretending that it would approach the issue of black equality, the end of that was not something we chose. It was something that white Democrats and Republicans chose. Same goes for Jim Crow, the destruction of the black Wall Streets, redlining, housing discrimination, job discrimination, all of which continues to the present day, all the way up until today. These are things that were done to us. Now, if you want to try to wag your finger at a few black people who are misbehaving at the local Walmart, they are a small minority and they are economically irrelevant to the position of the black majority. So when you see these two-bit professional BS artists talking about finances and they allude vaguely, very vaguely, to black people, that's because they're ultimately trying to be accepted by and appeal to a white audience. That's the dirty little secret of these phony financial mouthpieces. Especially ones like this fool in particular. They all want to be Grant Cardone or Scott Galloway or some other white guy who gets paid big to talk about money. And you can only do that if you gather a large white following. And as I've said to you for over 17 years, every black person in America knows that if you're trying to ingratiate yourself with the dominant society, the easiest road to do it is to go ahead and deny the reality of race. Barack Obama did that at the 2004 DNC convention. Here you had a man standing giving the keynote address and saying there is no black America, there is no white America, only the United States of America. And we keep hearing this from all of these fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools. So when you have the black grassroots making noise about what we're owed, these hit dogs, and dogs is what they are, will be the first ones to say, I don't want you getting reparations because that's going to mess things up for me. That lets you know whose side they're on. There's only two types of black people. Those who are trying to tear down white supremacy, and those who are hoping to find a comfortable place under it. Well, as a wise man once said, it's no measure of health to be adjusted to a sick society. The same sellout mentality that was on the plantations is alive and well today. This is why I love the issue of reparations. It is a wonderful political issue because it's truth serum. You can't sugarcoat it, you can't sidestep it. It uniquely threatens the dominant society. So if you're some bootlicking, buck-dancing clown who tries to pretend that they're on the side of black people, go ahead and bring up reparations and then watch as they look over at Massa. Oh, Massa ain't gonna like that. And then these fools will show you where they really stand, where they've always stood. They can't say, well, you know what? Black people aren't owed reparations. So instead what they say is, well, it just wouldn't do any good. That's the lie that they go to. They have to reassure their would-be white sponsors and donors that they're not like the rest of these agitating troublemakers over here. No different than the plantations. While the Nat Turners were saying we have to burn down this wicked house, you always had the ancestors of these modern-day sellouts saying, Massa, we got a good house here, and I ain't gonna let them troublemakers do nothing to it. I don't want to see none of y'all's gets free, cause y'all wouldn't do nothing with freedoms anyways. Don't you know that there were Negroes talking like that all throughout slavery? And we still see it today. People like this live in their own little dream world full of media fantasies and their own self-imposed ignorance. For example, a popular falsehood spouted by a dummy is that, well, these immigrants, they work harder than black Americans, don't you know? I did an entire video that totally debunked that talking point. And if you want to know what a lie the whole immigrants work harder than black people thing happens to be, Trump's putting in place all of his travel bans and such. And the main thing that these corporations are being forced to admit is, well, it's not a matter of immigrants working harder, it's working cheaper. And that being the case because it's good for corporate profits at the cost of quality. Far as they're concerned, they have to defend a particular practice because it's good for the bottom line. And of course, people like this are too slow to understand because they take their talking points from idiots like Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell was the person most responsible for the lie that black immigrants come to the U.S. and just immediately do better than black Americans, etc. He wasn't the only person pushing that lie, but he was the one most responsible for popularizing it. No. That's a lie. They do their best to blend in with us and take advantage of the opportunities that we made available to them. There's a reason why there were a lot less non-white immigrants to the U.S. prior to the 1960s. And even the ones who got in, they hardly had these thriving metropolises and all of this upward mobility. That only happened after the 1960s. It wasn't because of their own hard work dent in industry. It was because of policy changes that we forced on the system. And it was the result of white power needing to co-opt them to be a political counter-lever against us and the increasingly dangerous demands that we were making. They needed to confuse our internal politics, and that's what happened. Black immigrants try to simultaneously swing on our coattails while at the same time telling white employers and recruiters that they're not one of us. Now, of course, it's not all of them who do that, but enough do. White power sees this, and it recognizes the opportunity there, and because we had been on the whole Pan-African kick for so long, we allowed it to happen, right up until the moment we stopped. It's amazing how you have these idiots who idolize fools like Thomas Sowell. They can't tell you anything that he says about economics, but they know the white right likes Sowell, and Sowell says asinine absurdities about black people. And if you're a dummy who thinks of himself as some sort of edgelord, this is the guy that you want to emulate because you think it sounds smart. Well, these anti-reparations financial gurus do have one thing in common with Thomas Sowell. Nobody takes them seriously either. Thomas Sowell's supposed to be an economist, but serious economists call him a joke. There's a reason that nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, ever refers to Thomas Sowell's scribblings on economics. Even white right-wingers don't refer to him. For as long as he was an alleged economist, shouldn't he have written something, published something, put forward a theory of some sort, something that demonstrated he had made a contribution to his chosen field? Instead, he would simply regurgitate Milton Friedman's greatest hits. And the white right-wingers who pretended to respect him all these years, they don't care what he has to say about the actual thing that matters, the economy, which is supposed to be his chosen field of expertise. Don't believe me? Thomas Sowell first started getting put on television around the early 1980s. He was basically the white right's black friend, trying to be counter-programming against all of the black voices that were seen on television throughout the late 60s up until the 70s. When the economy crashed in the late 1970s, about the time Thomas Sowell was being put on TV, does anyone remember what Thomas Sowell said about that? How about when the Great Recession of 1989 crashed the economy? Anyone remember what Thomas Sowell said about that cataclysm? Or the impact of Bill Clinton's policies on the economy during the 90s? Anyone remember what Sowell said about that? When you had all of those corporations crash during W's first term, I'm talking about Enron, WorldCom, Tyco, Sunbeam, Adelphia, anyone remember what Thomas Sowell said about all of these companies crashing during a Republican's term of office? And a few years later, when the bottom fell out of the economy in 2008 during W's second term, anyone remember what Sowell, the economist, said about that? And then you look at the current economic train wreck going on. Anyone recall what Thomas Sowell's pearls of wisdom are on that? Of course not. He's an economist, but nobody cares what he thinks about the economy. So when some idiot is praising Thomas Sowell, they literally have no clue what they're talking about. Thomas Sowell is only boosted by white right-wing elitists because he's one of the few Negroes dumb enough to spout that level of gibberish. His so-called degree in economics is a token piece of paper. It's merely meant to credentialize a bootlick. He's not respected for his intelligence. He's just put on radio to say, I'm black and I have an economics degree, and let me tell you what I think about race. What does race have to do with the economy? Nothing, but I'm black and I have a degree, so that gives me expertise. See, I'm credentialized. The biggest lie the devil ever pulled was to convince the world that he didn't exist. But we showed the world the devil does exist. So now we have the devil's minions saying, okay, the devil exists, you got us, but he's not really doing that much evil anymore, only minor stuff, and that was a long time ago. So the devil does exist, but he's not really a problem, not anymore. That's what the lie is these days. Now, in what universe does that even make sense? Immigrants don't work harder than black Americans. I've demonstrated how they get set-asides and other handouts. Many of them move to more financially active areas, but even so, they don't outperform the people who already live there. And were it not for anti-black policies, black people would outperform everyone. For example, the Biden administration was successfully suing banks for redlining black people. And that was just 2 years ago. These white financial and banking entities systematically lock black entrepreneurs out of the kind of funding that they freely give to immigrants. This makes it where it takes far longer for a black business to get started, makes it take far longer for those black businesses to scale up and expand. And since so many businesses in general rely on revolving lines of credit from banks, it makes it far more likely that a black business will fail because they don't have that kind of economic underpinning. Even when you get things going on your own, these zoning boards and other governmental entities attack black businesses. That's not a question of hard work. It's a question of deliberate, targeted resource deprivation against one particular group. No other group is subjected to any one of those things, and yet black people are subjected to all of them. And then we get these sellouts and snakes in the grass who sit there blaming black people for all of these things that are done against us. It makes very little sense to be constantly lecturing black people about, well, black people need to get their act together financially. Whenever you point to black people who have, you also see that virtually all of them come under attack by these people who either bring some sort of lawsuit against them, or they become the subject of some DA's prosecution, or the government says you're doing something wrong and we got to shut you down. Why does no one ever talk about that? Because for these wannabe race grifters, it would put a jinx on their hustle. Hell, Dr. King was talking about this back in the 1960s, but I don't expect a dummy to know that. They don't do this to immigrants. They get capital based on being immigrants. There's all kinds of programs and set-asides for them. And also because many of them got an education in their home countries. Black students have perpetual war waged on them, like what we see people such as Ed Blum doing with his nuisance suits against universities to try to scare them out of black college admissions. And he's also been systematically attacking black business incubators as well. Again, do you see these white right-wingers attacking anything that supports immigrant businesses? This is how immigrants go from having no net worth to having the same as everyone else overnight because it's handed to them. They don't have all of these roadblocks in their way. And it's not even impressive because we have a minimum wage in America, whereas in their own home countries no such thing exists. But a dummy didn't tell you that, did he? To the point that immigrants are successful, people like this don't know why, how, or to what extent. This is an idiot doing their impersonation of what they think a smart person sounds like. When you have a pervasive system of targeted racism, it's far easier to make excuses for it than it is to fight against it. Admitting there's a problem is hard. Denying it is easy. And we can tell which one a dummy chooses. And in the black community, if black people stopped going to certain restaurants and hair and nail shops, a lot of these immigrants' so-called success would dry up overnight. The same way Soul was shamelessly butt-kissing, these new fraudsters were doing the same. And I also noticed virtually all these creeps were peddling some kind of financial guru course or advice or whatever. We talk black group economics and black empowerment, and these charlatans try to imitate some of our verbiage, but they represent none of our ideals. At least with Jason Whitlock, he has the honesty, if it can be called that, not to pretend to be a financial guru. Whitlock is a fool whose acumen about sports goes no further than a drunk in a bar. The only thing to respect about Whitlock, and I put respect in quotes, and you should take this with a ton of salt, at least Whitlock has the sense to stay in his lane. He tries to race grift by giving his uninformed opinion about sports, while constantly saying that black people are doing this, that, and a third. He doesn't then try to offer some I'll make you rich advice. We've seen this before with the fraud, aka Crispy, and Jesse Lee Peterson and others. You can tell when some Negro is desperately auditioning for some white media company to give them a TV deal, or they're trying to get the attention of someone at a streaming service, or they're hoping to get some white corporation to sponsor them, so they can try to parlay their audience into some sort of deal to be on some big white media website like the Daily Wire. They hope to become the next Candace Owens. These clowns ought to ask Candace Owens how much money did she actually make when she was at the Daily Wire. It didn't pay that well. That's why she struck out on her own. But that's the hustle. Say outrageous stuff about black people to get some quick and dirty clout, then try to get into the algorithm by talking about whatever is trending at the moment that's anti-black, and then shoehorn negative remarks about black people into it. They can be talking about the man on the moon, just say that black people stole the moon or something, and then pimp your ignorant audience to some corporation for white sponsorship money. But you know, that can't work for a dummy. You can't be an influencer when you've got no influence. That's the lesson of Crispy. He had an audience, such as it was, and they were a large audience, but they were also worthless. Same went for Issa Rae, by the way. She ran the same hustle. Look at how much money her crowdfunding for her Awkward Black Girls series raised, and then look at how the new voices of black media smoked her. And did it all without the untold millions in free advertising that she got from all of those white media outlets who were constantly pushing her to people who didn't want to hear what she had to say. See, white power wants to be able to pick and choose winners, and it's not based on merit or talent, but based on how useful they are to the status quo. Someone should tell these mouth-breathing bootlicks that Ben Shapiro can get a white fracking billionaire to sponsor the Daily Wire, and Steve Bannon can get a tech billionaire to sponsor Breitbart, and Roger Ailes can get a billionaire to sponsor Fox News. But none of those white power brokers, or any black ones for that matter, are going to sponsor some Temu version of Jason Whitlock. When you see these idiots attacking reparations, just remember, they're angry because they think we're going to make it awkward for them when they're trying to kiss some white producer or talent agent's rump. Go ahead and say something that makes the dominant society feel threatened or merely uncomfortable, and you can bet on cue these butter biscuit bootlicks will put on their ragged little capes and come flying, or rather waddling, to the rescue. They'll pretend to be on black people's side, but you let black people as a group say this is something we want that the dominant society doesn't like, and they'll be sitting here going, "What are you niggers doing? Y'all shouldn't be saying anything. Y'all just need to be quiet." Yeah, they'll show their true colors when you put massa under pressure. These asinine Thomas Sowell wannabes aren't very bright. That's why they're Thomas Sowell wannabes. Ask yourself this question. Have you ever seen a dummy speak up vociferously for issues like an anti-black hate crime law? Do people like that ever speak up for an issue such as that? Or if you raise the subject with them, do you think that they would say, well, what about black on black crime? You think that would be the response instead? And the same way people like this try to use gibberish and babbling about financial figures, they would also try the same thing to justify why the real problem is black people. You can bet on that. We got a bunch of fools and clowns who are actively working against black people's interests, and because the white media is not our friend, these idiots can find their way onto some radio station or what have you. When they hear that kind of talk, they go, "Oh, this is the kind of Negro we want on the air." Fools like this are diametrically opposed to the interests of the black community, and black people ought to know better than to waste their time listening to a dummy. But there's also one other thing that needs to be kept in mind when dealing with these backstabbing, butt-kissing race grifters. These individuals sooner or later run out of butter biscuits. White power has no permanent plans for any of them, and the same way that you saw Candace Owens turn and start biting the hand that was feeding her as she began looking for a new hand to sprinkle her plate with butter biscuits, before it's all over, this fool will end up the same way. When white supremacy's done with its tools, it breaks its tools. It doesn't matter how loudly you were singing their song. It doesn't matter how viciously you attacked black people. At the end of the day, they had no permanent plans for any of these tools. So yeah, that's the way that this story is going to end. And when that occurs, and this clown calls themselves slithering back to black people, make sure you tell a dummy that he needs to go and get his support either from immigrants or from the ghost of Thomas Sowell or from whatever white billionaire fracking executive he was desperately hoping to grift some money from. Because the black community, we're simply too lazy and too incompetent to be able to support a genius like a dummy. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Amir Miller, Richard Allen Lovell, Latavius, Pharrell Taylor, and Terrence Welch. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.